And welcome back to Alice Talks Football, and welcome back to another live Manchester United news, transfer news, and update show. It is absolutely freezing today if you live in the UK. So if you live somewhere warm, I am very, very jealous of you. But we're going to talk about the impact of Ratcliffe's message. Now, if you don't know what Ratcliffe's message was, he obviously came out in an interview and basically said, Amorim's got 3 years. He showed his big backing of Amorim at a time, I think it was around the time of the Brentford loss, where things were really negative around Amorim and it looked like Amorim was going to be sacked. He kind of just came out and really backed him, and United haven't lost a game since. And Ruben Amorim actually talks about how that interview's had an impact on the dressing room and him to an extent of he feels like that interview settled down a lot of the noise in the dressing room and completely changed the team. And we're going to talk about the impact of Ratcliffe and his words and how it is, I'm going to back the manager over the players, whereas I think in the past the players have been backed over managers and managers have been sacked and the same players have lived on. Ineos approaches, it's the manager that's more powerful than players, but also it's not just about player power, attitude. When you look at, like Garnacho being kicked out for attitude, it's about ability. Hoyland and Arna wasn't good enough. And you're looking at your Mounts with his injury record, like Amorim likes him, but with his injury record, has he been good enough? I think he's been all right this season. I think Mount's been good this season. You're looking at Delo, is he good enough? Looking at Agati, is he good enough? Those kind of players won't be in the bomb squad because they have an attitude issue, but it is, well, we'll just go sign your replacements and you might not get the minutes, so you may want to look at a move. And I'm going to talk about that and sort of Ineos's approach to things and how it is really changing things at Manchester United. We'll do a recap on Sekou Kone, a couple of updates on the youth. We're going to talk about a few other news stories. We might touch upon Elliot Anderson, Gallagher, Baleba, potentially later on in the show. I mean, it's just the same news sort of being spouted about. But I wanted to give you an international break update before we dive into all the other stories, because no injuries, which is big. We've been linked to Adeyemi, but I doubt we buy him, and I don't even know where he would play. And apparently he's got attitude issues. Time Solagate, not good enough to be a squad player. I think he's good enough to be a squad player, but when you look at the money we paid for him, 50 million, you want him to be good enough to be a starter. But yeah. So let's dive into a few things. I want to dive into something that United People's TV put out on Twitter, giving a little update on the international break, which has been a success for United because Gabriel's picked up a big injury for Brazil. Well, not big injury, but he could be out for 2 months. There's been a few injuries about in the international break. Arsenal have been particularly impacted by injuries, whereas I think we've done quite well this international break. So Mazraoui played the most minutes, and I think out of all our players, I'm quite happy that Mazraoui played the most amount of minutes. He registered 2 assists. Mazraoui's not played a lot of minutes of football. So, players like Mazraoui that haven't played a lot of minutes of football, or even Dorgan that haven't played a lot of minutes of football, I'm quite happy for that because they get those minutes in their legs that they need. I'd like if Xerxes to have gone and got some minutes. Casemiro played a lot of minutes, which I didn't want him to do, but he scored a goal. He was fantastic. He's basically been called out by Ancelotti as Brazil's most important player. So Mazraoui gets 2 assists, plays well. Casemiro scores, plays well. Le Mans makes his debut for Belgium. Dorgu got a nice amount of minutes in the leg, scored a goal. Bruno played 90 minutes, only one of the 2 games, which is good, was completely rested for the Scotland game where they fell apart and got a hat-trick. And De Ligt played his first 90 minutes since September and won a penalty and kept a clean sheet. De Ligt had been out of the squad for a year. He's finally been let back in, and what a performance. And I think, to be fair, there was a bit of gender against De Ligt in the Netherlands squad. He's been so good this season. But the most important thing is 0 injuries to report, which is just what you love to see, which is good stuff. And the international break is finally over. We have to wait till Monday to our next game, which sucks, but we do have football back on Saturday. So, 72 hours to go till some football, but I'm fed up with the international break. But let's dive into the news. So, if you weren't aware, Jim Ratcliffe did an interview and he basically said, despite this interview was at a time where a lot of pressure was on Amorim, it was believed that Amorim was going to be sacked. He came at this interview and got rid of all the noise about Amorim being sacked and was basically like, I'm going to give him 3 years. And Ruben Amorim was actually asked about Jim Ratcliffe's interview where he showed public faith and backed him. If you remember when Jim Ratcliffe gave the interview, that settled down a lot of noise around the club and a lot of noise around the club completely changed, and that was really important for the team. His words had a huge impact, not on the way I do things, but the way people see. And I think what Amorim means by that is any players that thought, well, I don't like Amorim, he's going to be sacked soon, I can do what I want, and now I'm like, oh, I can't do what I want, I need to get in check, I need to prove a point to Amorim. Do you know what I mean? In the past, players know, okay, the manager's going to be sacked, a new manager's going to come in, la, 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 la. Now it's like, well, if you're not doing what Amorim wants, you will go. Amorim isn't being sacked, you will go. And the players know that. And that makes the players put their head down 10 times more. And they're like, you look at the effort levels in that Sunderland game compared to that Brentford game, it was a different level. You look at the effort and intensity levels since that Ratcliffe interview, and it's huge. I think Amorim's tactical approach has been wrong in a lot of games, but I also think the play intensity's been low. And I think that's gone up another level. I think that's completely changed the dressing room, this Amorim interview. I think it's had a real impact on the dressing room. 5 games unbeaten. And I was just thinking about it, and I feel like with Ratcliffe, player power is dying, and that is really good. And that's maybe one of the best things Ineos have done, is you can notice there's no player power issues like there used to be. You know, I think there's a really big impact on the dressing room, Ratcliffe's public backing of Amorim. Because any player causing problems will be gone before the manager. Sancho shipped out and not allowed back despite a new manager coming in. Sancho disrespected Ten Hag. They thought, just because we've got rid of Ten Hag, you can't come back in. Anthony was moved on because he wasn't good enough and he didn't want to be here. Rashford was pushed out and Garnacho was forced to leave. Garnacho spoke out about the manager who came 15th, who lost the final. A couple years ago, that manager wouldn't have been sacked. A few years ago, like if Van Howard came 15th and lost the final, he'd have been sacked and Garnacho would have stayed. But Amorim wasn't sacked and Garnacho was forced out. 3 years ago, it's the other way around. 4 years ago, it's the other way around. 5 years ago, it's the other way around. But it's different. This is the first time where they've gone, yeah, this manager done bad, but this player's a brat. Let's not get this player a new manager. Let's get this player out. So we forced Garnacho to leave. Rashford, I think, was disciplinary issues off the pitch. He was pushed out. Anthony, we've had 2 years. You've been crap. You can leave. Sancho, you ain't coming back because you disrespected the last manager. We don't want a lazy player that disrespects managers. So Ineos are like, well, you are in the bomb squad. You're not welcome back. It's not protecting egos. It's not dressing room politics. It's, do you respect your manager? No, then you're not welcome. I feel like Amorim starts to have that authority that I feel like other managers haven't had. The squad know the culture's changed. We are building a team that has professionalism, that has discipline, that has standards. It's not just individuals. It is, you must respect the manager. Now, there's been a lot of noise and a lot of news reports about how Ruben Amorim is different to other managers. He takes a bit of a stand back. He doesn't go on team socials because he doesn't want to be a friend. He wants to remain an authority figure at Manchester United. He's very different to past managers. And I think that's particularly interesting with Amorim because I've been very critical of Amorim's tactics because, as some of you will know, I'm not the biggest fan of a lot of Amorim's tactics. But Amorim as a person, Amorim as a character I like. I think Amorim as a manager is very likeable in terms of, as a person, so he's very likeable. I think for the most part, he handles interviews well. I think some of his interviews when things were going wrong were a bit iffy, but he's a likeable guy. And I think he's done a very good job in terms of getting the respect of the players. My question about Amorim is more his stubbornness and his tactical approach. But we had Nathan Salt come out just yesterday and say that Amorim is very direct, but he's easy to deal with. He often likes to exchange a joke or two with the regulars who speak with him each week. Early on, he was guilty of, from a club's point of view, being too honest. An example, calling his side the worst Man United side in history. He called out his players. He's slightly more careful now. But Ruben Amorim will have team meetings. If Ruben Amorim has a problem with one player, he'll call it out in front of the whole team. Ruben Amorim has team meetings. Ruben Amorim has public meetings with the team. And, you know, he doesn't want to be buddy-buddy. He doesn't go to the socials. He wants to remain that authority figure. And I quite like this. You know, when we lost to Brighton 3-1 in mid-January, Amorim, you know, was crying and smashing TVs. He shows a real angry side. And some people won't like that. But, you know, we hear the stories of Fergie and the Boot and Beckham. Sometimes that's just what top managers do. Amorim does not join players on social activities. He keeps a distance. He wants to maintain that sense of authority. And I think that's what United dressing room needs. You know, he's called out certain players publicly. He's been a bit brutal. He's lost his shit at times. But I think that's what we need in a manager. We don't want nice guy, buddy, I'm going to be best friends with the player. We want a bit of an authority figure in there. And I think that's what Amorim brings that I like. So Adeyemi, Anderson, Baleba are my dream transfers. I take out Adeyemi for like Gay, but that would be very good. Something I absolutely love about Amorim is that he isn't making dumb excuses like Ten Hag or Slot did, but overall I hate the Akers wing-back system. I agree. I don't like his system. I don't like his tactics. But I like that he's not making excuses. Yeah. Mount is a good informed squad player. I like Xerxes too much to want him pushed out. I like Xerxes and I like Mount, and I think as squad players they're fine. My problem with Mason Mount is for him to be what the second highest earner at the club. Let me look. I think he's on 250k a week. He can't be a squad player. Like if you look at the fact that Mbumo's on 100k less a week than Mason Mount, and Mbumo's on what's probably after we'll say Mbumo's on about 80k less a week than Mason Mount. Look at the impact Mbumo's coming and done compared to Mount. Mount is a good player. Mount is a good squad player. When Mount is fit, he's good. He suits the system. He's a nice guy. He works hard. But Mason Mount, for 250k a week, cannot be a squad player. You have to be a starting player. And Mason Mount, I think, is a good player. And he's good enough to be in our starting 11 a lot of weeks. But he's not an Mbumo. He's not a Matthias de Ligt. He's not an Amad Diallo where, boom, you're right in that team. He'll be good in this game, good in that game, mould him in here and there. But he doesn't impact every game, but he's a good player. If Mason Mount was on 100 grand a week and was a squad player, I wouldn't think about selling him. He's on 250k a week. That is the issue with Mason Mount. Like, he's good. I like him. He's had a good season. He stayed fit this season. He's been well. He's been impressive. But we have to think, would Arsenal keep Mason Mount? Would Liverpool keep Mason Mount? Would City keep Mason Mount? Or would they say, if we can get a good offer in the summer, we might move him on? Arsenal could have kept Jorginho, but they thought, well, we'll get rid of him and get Norgard. Slight improvement there. They already had Odegaard, but they still went and got Eze. Just because they had Ben White didn't stop them getting Timber. Just because they had Lewis Skelly and Calafiore didn't stop them getting Hincapié. Just because they had the Saliba didn't stop them getting Mascara. I think with Mason Mount, he's a good player, but when you look at his wages, he needs to start every week. He needs to impose himself more and show leadership. I like Mason Mount. I think he's good. I think that he's been really impressive this season, and I think it's not his fault with injuries. But I do think with the wages he's on, he needs to take a wage cut, to be honest. I'm going to dive into some more news then. So let me dive into the next bit of news. So it's not just about attitude, I think, that Ratcliffe's changing. It is about ability, to be honest. It is about ability. Ratcliffe isn't just about removing bad attitudes, because Onana and Højlund have always had good attitudes. They weren't in the bomb squad, but they didn't want to leave. Onana and Højlund did not want to leave. They did not want to get out of Manchester United. Despite not being in the bomb squad, they made it very clear they're comfortable here, they're happy to stay. But Amorim was like, no. Amorim was like, I want upgrades. Amorim wasn't putting Onana and Højlund in the bomb squad. He was like, fine, whatever, I'm happy with you. But Amorim got Sesko and Amorim got Le Mans. And when Amorim got Sesko and Le Mans, Højlund didn't even make the squad anymore. Højlund, who was adamant he's staying, that wanted to make it work at United, he wasn't even making the squad. And after 2-3 games of not making the squad, Højlund, that was adamant he was staying, he was never in the bomb squad, he could train with the team and everything, was like, okay, I need to find a move. Onana, who refused to leave earlier in the window, because Amorim played Bay and D the first 3 games of the season and brought in Le Mans and told Onana he's now third choice, Onana was like, okay, I'll look for a move. Onana and Højlund, in July, thought they were staying at United and there was no chance of them leaving. We get to August and they're now looking for moves. Because we brought in Le Mans, we brought in Sesko. And that's what United are going to do this year. We're looking at Semenyo. And if we look at Semenyo as a left 10 that could potentially play left wing back, well, that's Mason Mount gone. Semenyo and Cunha are the left 10s. Ahmed and Bouma are the right 10s. Sesko and potentially someone else are the strikers. Maybe Xerxes if he stays. That is Mason Mount gone. If we look at Semenyo, that's Mason Mount gone. If we get Semenyo, we're looking at Anderson and Mbele. We're looking at 2 midfielders. We talk about Casemiro and Bruno being replaced, but I think that's Agate gone. Agate's happy, but Agate's going to be like, well, they brought Anderson and Mbele in. I'm not going to get minutes. You look at Semenyo, you look at Agate, you look at Elliot Anderson. Well, that's just going to push Mount potentially out. Semenyo, Elliot Anderson and Mbele will push Agate out. And to be honest, if we sign a wing back, that could push Delo out. Because as much as I think Delo is a nice guy and a decent player, he's not a wing back. He doesn't suit the system. And I think, Amorim likes Mount, but I think injuries, and if he fails to impose himself big this season, I think he'll be gone. I think Agate just isn't at the technical level. Delo hasn't been good enough. Ineos will look at those 3 players and say, well, they're probably the ones at risk. We're going to look at upgrades. Because if you can't meet the level or you can't stay fit, well, we're just going to look at your replacements because that's what City would do. That's what Chelsea would do. That's what Arsenal would do. So it's not just have they got an attitude issue. It's also like you're going to be replaced unless you step up. You're going to be replaced unless you step up. Selling Mount will mean him taking a pay cut. I don't think it's possible. He hasn't played enough games for teams to want him bearing in mind the injury issues. That is the problem. Yeah, imagine Semenyo X Cunha left and Ahmed X and Bumo right. Maybe not Edison. I'll say Anderson and Believer linking with Sesko in the middle. Leach, Dillit, Maz. Tell me a better squad. I mean, that's very good. You can put Yoro in there as well. I would just swap Edison for Anderson, and that is very good. Semenyo would be good if we played a 4-3-3, but right now I don't think he's the right profile. Semenyo, if we went to a 4-3-3 and had Semenyo as an option, that would be tasty. That would be tasty. We need to replace all the aging, high-wage players and injury-prone players, and with Sir Jim here, if not good enough, time to go. I agree. And then look, I like Casemiro and I like Maguire, and particularly Casemiro this season's influence has been nuts. But if we can get Baleba and Elliot Anderson in, I don't think Casemiro will be a huge miss. I think he will be a big miss if he got injured this season. But I think, we can get the right placements. Because as much as I like Casemiro, I don't want him here another year on 300 plus K a week. We need to get that wage bill down, starting with Casemiro, starting with Mount. Harry Maguire, not signing a new deal because we're not willing to offer him X amount. So again, I look at it and I think, Harry Maguire could potentially go. Rashford's going, of course, high wages. Sancho's going, of course, high wages. Casemiro's going high wages. That does free up a lot of money. I'm talking of Sancho. This has been reported by Court Offside. Sancho is in discussion with 3 of Turkey's biggest clubs regarding a permanent January move away from United. Fenerbahce, Galatasaray and Besiktas. He's failed to make an impact at Aston Villa and would be happy to facilitate any transfer. So there's talk of Villa cancelling Sancho's loan in January and Sancho moving to Turkey. I think because Sancho is a money grabber, I think he will probably wait until the summer so we can get a big signing on bonus and go to Turkey. I think Sancho's fallen out of love with football. I think Sancho just doesn't really give a crap about football. I think he just wants the money because he's been pretty crap at Aston Villa as well. Bruni said his top 3 players have been Semenyo, Bournemouth and Gyökeres. Now, Gyökeres is a bit of a surprising one there. Semenyo, of Bournemouth, and Bumo of Man United and Gyökeres. Semenyo and Bumo and Gyökeres apparently are Wayne Rooney's best 3 players this season, which surprised me. I wouldn't put Gyökeres in there if I was going to be honest. I think he's been better than he gets credit for, but that was quite funny. I like Casemiro. I'd be happy to stay another season. If Casemiro would drastically lower his wages and stay another year, that would be great. Sancho, the further away from Old Trafford, the better. I mean, you know what? I think Man United ruin a lot of players, and I think we are the wrong club for a lot of players. And maybe at that moment in time, we were the wrong club for Sancho. He came off the abuse in the Euros, he had an ear infection, and we're not really the type of environment that gives him time to build up his confidence. But I think Sancho done it to himself. Like with Højlund, I'm like, yeah, we knocked his confidence. With Anthony, we knocked his confidence. With Rashford, we brought him down. But with Sancho, I'm like, the boy did it to himself. Like, he was lazy. He didn't care about football. All he had to do was apologise, and he'd rather not play football for 4 months than apologise. I always feel like with Sancho, like, I have no sympathy for him. I don't think we ruined his career. I think he did it to himself. I want to talk about a few other news stories going about, by the way, guys. Sekou Kone is effectively fifth choice midfielder at senior level. It seems increasingly likely that he'll be allowed to leave on loan, was said by Rich Fay. I like Sekou Kone. He's obviously had that horrible eye socket injury, so he's not played loads of minutes at youth level. But again, I don't think he's going to get many minutes this season unless we had a severe injury outbreak. And with 1 game a week, I think that's just less likely to happen, touch wood. So I think maybe a loan for Sekou Kone would be good to get some minutes in his legs for sure. I agree with that. Other news coming out was that Amorim spoke about young players and said there's 4 things that he looks at when he brings up young players to the first team. And he says, first of all, it's an honour to play for Man United, and sometimes some young players might take that for granted. He said, next, you have to look at the physical aspect because it's important for playing in the Premier League. Are they physically good enough, not just about technicality? And then you have to help the kids manage the media attention. You have to be very careful when a young player plays a match, not to overhype it. That's part of the problem in the past. And then finally, talent and work ethic. So Amorim is saying with a young player, and I think he's spot on, they need to know what an honour it is for playing for Man United, what an opportunity it is, what their talent and work ethic is. But this player also has to be able to deal with the media attention and not get overhyped and carried away, but also has to be physical enough to handle the league. And I think that's true. And I think the one young youth player that Ruben Amorim has taken a real liking to is Shea Lacey. He's very protective over Lacey. And there is reports and a feeling internally that Lacey is going to get a debut soon. He was set to be called up to the squad for the Sunderland game, but then something happened last minute to change that. But there's a feeling that Lacey will get more opportunities. Nathan Salt actually spoke about Shea Lacey recently and said there's a lot of interest in Shea Lacey, but United are not entertaining offers for the 18-year-old. While Sekou Kone could be put out on loan, Man United aren't interested in putting Shea Lacey out on loan. James Scanlon, JT Fitzgerald, Bean Sheary could also go out on loan. Ethan Williams is doing well on loan. Amas is doing well on loan. So United are looking to send out a few more players on loan. But those familiar think that Shea Lacey will not be going out on loan and could get some opportunities soon, which I think is quite interestingly mentioned by Nathan Salt as well. But I do think with AFCON, it could be Shea Lacey's chance. It could be. I love Casemiro. I love Casemiro as well. Sancho feels football is hard work. He'd rather play video games and get some cash. That's the problem with Sancho. I think he lost his love for football. Does loaning Kone make sense in January, Alice? Bruno and Casemiro are starting mid. Zagata and Maino not getting a sniff. Kone's the right age now, especially lower end opposition in cups. Well, I think that would be the minutes for Zagata and Maino, wouldn't it? Yeah. Semenyo isn't needed. If the club buys Semenyo and a striker, the club is well and truly finished. That's not what we need. I wouldn't say we're well and truly finished. I would just say that we should be buying a midfielder before any other position. But look, Semenyo would be great. It's just that we only play one game a week, so it's not like we necessarily need him right now. Do you think Cheetah will get opportunities? I think he'll go out on loan next year. Maybe if Sesko's injury was more serious, I think you could see a chance for Cheeto. He's obviously been training more with the first team. But I think it will be Xerxes, Cunha, and Mbeumo who plays number 9. I think we've got enough players that maybe Cheeto won't be called upon. Is Baleba a one-season wonder, or do you think United moves rattled him? That is the big question, and I wish I knew the answer to. I think the United moves rattled him, and he's had some injury issues, and he didn't have a pre-season. I think that's probably what it is. I hope that's what it is, because I think we're going to get Baleba in the summer, and if we spend big money on him to find out he was a one-season wonder, that wouldn't really be the ideal situation. Listen, people, I hope you're doing well. I hope you enjoyed today's live show. Just covering a few Man United news and stories. I want to get into some of the final stories going about it today, but I wanted to make it just a short live show so you're up to date on really just the changes that I think Ineos have done and Ratcliffe has done. But obviously, going back to Shea Lacey, Stephen Railston said that Shea Lacey is pushing towards making his senior debut this season, and the youngster's been one of the most highly regarded talents in his age group and consistently performed in the campaign. Jack Fletcher could also operate in one of the 10 roles. He was named on the bench on several occasions last season, and Bentito Mantato is his chances of breaking into the first team have increased when Amorim appointed because he would fit into United's system. So Mantato, Fletcher and Shea Lacey have been spoken about as the youngsters most likely to get opportunities, with Sekou Kone going out on loan. I think it'll be interesting to see what happens in AFCON. I'm just going to see if anyone is live to redirect to. I just wanted to do a short live stream on really Amorim and Ineos and the dressing room changes. But I don't think anyone's live to really redirect to here. Otherwise I'd redirect you over to someone. But listen, people, I want to thank you all for watching today's live show. Please do hit that like button if you have not already. Of course, subscribe down below if you're new. I will be back tomorrow with another live show. Thank you for watching. Bye.